built barracks, bodies piled up in its hospital wards, and streets appeared on maps that no longer exist anywhere. The men who arrived on those grounds had names on rosters that outlasted the buildings meant to shelter them through training and war. A hospital designed for hundreds received thousands, and the math of that gap was measured in ways nobody wanted to document. 3 stories from that ground survived in fragments, each one pointing toward the same missing answer. Which names on those rosters were never crossed off, and why? What you're left with when you pull those records today is a silence that feels less like absence and more like something deliberately set aside. The ground itself gives nothing back. No marker, no street sign, no wall still standing to tell you what happened here. But the rosters remain, and the names on them are still waiting for someone to finish the count. The barracks came first, and the men inside them are where this story has to start. The rosters list them by name, rank, and bunk number, men from hollow communities most Americans had never heard of before the war. They came down from the ridgelines carrying almost nothing, and the Army gave them a number, a cot, and a building that smelled of green lumber and coal smoke. Some of them had never slept more than 10 miles from where they were born, and now they were stacked 4 to a room in barracks that held hundreds. The drill fields outside those windows turned soft men into soldiers faster than anyone had planned for because the war didn't wait. What the rosters don't tell you is what happened after the last entry, the name that appears in one column and then simply stops. No discharge date, no transfer order, no grave marker in any registry you can find. These weren't men who slipped through a bureaucratic crack. They were men the system processed and then lost. Some of them walked out of those barracks on their own feet and vanished into a war that kept no careful account of the dying. And the ones who didn't walk out, the sick, the feverish, the ones who never made it to a trench, were sent somewhere else entirely. Somewhere the camp had built in a hurry and hoped would hold. The barracks filled faster than anyone had planned for, and the hospital filled faster than that. It had been designed to hold a few hundred men, a reasonable number on paper, for a post that was never supposed to become what it became. But the flu arrived before the war ended, and the arithmetic turned brutal almost overnight. Beds ran out first, then supplies, then the quiet that a sick man needs to have any chance at all. Orderlies moved through wards that had been converted from whatever rooms were available, storage, offices, spaces that had no business holding the dying. You have to sit with that image for a moment, men who had survived the drill fields and the crossing, undone not by enemy fire, but by a pathogen moving through close quarters. The hospital kept admitting because there was nowhere else for them to go. Some recovered, some didn't, and the records of exactly how many have never been complete. Outside those walls, streets had been laid down to connect all of it, the wards, the barracks, the whole temporary city. And those streets led somewhere, once. Outside those hospital walls, an entire city had grown up around the dying and the drilling. Streets ran in long straight lines between barracks rows, between mess halls and machine shops, and the offices of men who kept the paperwork moving. They named those streets, gave them numbers and directions, as if permanence were something you could just declare into existence. When the war ended, and the government decided it was finished with this place, the streets didn't close. They simply stopped being maintained, and the land took them back quietly. Within a generation, you couldn't walk those roads because they weren't roads anymore, just fields and second-growth timber and the occasional concrete footing going nowhere. The men who built them, who marched down them, who were carried along them to that overwhelmed hospital, most of them left no record that survives in any archive you can find today. A city that housed thousands was erased so completely that the erasure itself became the only monument, and so you're left holding a question that nobody in an official capacity has ever fully answered. If the streets are gone and the records are incomplete, who decides which lives get to leave a mark?